Now we get 6.
Okay, welcome to our Eid of Shabbat, Friday Parashat, Parashat Beha'alotecha, the exciting sequence and the incredible drama Parashat Beha'alotecha. And I refer to you, ironically, the parts of the parasha that don't seem to be so. In other words, the middle and past middle part of our parasha deals with the scene of the mitavim, those desirers, and the complaints that ensued, and Moshe Rabbeinu's challenge and his argument, so to speak, with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Afterwards, the elders being appointed as the assistants of Moshe Rabbeinu. Of course, the parasha ends with the famous scene of Miriam and Aharon speaking in a derogatory manner about Moshe and Hashem putting them in their place. A lot of excitement. That's not the drama that I'm referring to. Instead, I'm referring to what seems to be, in the first half, you can say, about parasha, a very confusing almost sequence of segments. So let me first say that this is a class that I'm going to be giving as a summary and as an explanation of this by the famous Rabbi Dov Ber, Rabbi Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, Rabbi J.B., as they know him, Soloveitchik, the famous rabbi, affectionately known as the Rav, and the shi'ur that he gave on this topic probably about 50 years ago, closer to 60 years ago. And I'll give a shout out to my wife's uncle, Mr. Victor Didier, who about close to 30 years ago gave me a cassette tape that had the Rav giving shi'ur. Of course, you can get a lot of the Rav shi'urim online in our day and age, but some of the precious recordings can't find anywhere. I'm not sure if you can dig this one up, but that cassette certainly was something that I embraced and listened to many times. And it is one of the great, profound presentations of Rabbi Soloveitchik on Torah and Parasha, and really a model of the way he analyzes things. So this is all about the Rav, and I'll embellish here and there and add things. Won't tell you when I'm adding them, but it's mainly based on his analysis. So what's the issue? The issue is, let's open up to Parashat Beha'alotecha. Let's say, aside from the first couple of Pesukim, which is a directive of Hashem to Aharon HaKohen regarding the menorah, you have a string of what I'll call segments of the parasha, and it seems, in his language, to be incomprehensible, because as we move along, we will be very hard-pressed to find any type of connection between these segments and any explanation as to why the Torah and its narrative is bringing them here and bringing them juxtaposed to each other. They will seem like an absolute has v'shalom, but disjointed presentation of the Torah, of the parasha. So let's look at them. Parashat Beha'alotecha, Bimidbar, Perek Het, chapter 8, and right after the first paragraph, the first segment that we notice, Pasuk He, is the sanctification or the appointment or the elevation of the tribe of Levi. They've already been identified and they've been counted, but this is the official sanctification of them and consecrating of their status as the sub-level Shevet Levi servants in God's temple and of God's nation after the Kohanim. Then, in the next segment, we'll call it, which is located in Perek Tet, the beginning of chapter 9, you'll see the Torah talking about that Bnei Israel had to offer Korban Pesach, which is a fact, which is necessary, but doesn't seem to have anything to do with the elevation and appointment of the Leviim, nor doesn't seem to have been necessary in this parasha, followed by the fact that some members of the nation were impure, and therefore the advent of, after Moshe inquiring with Hashem, which is called Pesach Sheni, the makeup a month later to bring that Korban Pesach. You were either impure or distant from the Mishkan, the Bet HaMikdash, when Korban Pesach was brought on the 14th of Nisan. You'd bring it subsequently on the 14th of Iyar. What is the connection between those two segments? What is this doing here? Segment 3 would be in Perek Tet, Pasuk Tet Vav, talking about the cloud system. And the cloud system is essentially the travel directive of Am Yisrael. We travel simply based on the movement of the Anan. And as the Torah tells us, the Anan may move in another day and we'll have to get up and move, or it may be stationary for quite a long time, number of months or years. And we, on the spur of the moment, will move based on the movement of the Anan. That's our travel system in the desert. What's the connection with the prior two segments? We don't know, apparently. Segment 4, following that, beginning of Perek Yud, chapter 10, talking about the Hasaserot, the trumpets. This is the communication system. This is where the leaders of Am Yisrael would blow trumpets for the convening of the leaders of the tribes, blow trumpets for convening of the entire nation, gathering them for warnings of war, and of course for holidays and Asher Hodashim. That's segment 4. Segment 5 is an actual event that occurred, where it says on the second, this is from Yetziat Mitzrayim, the second year, second month, 20th day, the Anan actually moved, and Am Yisrael actually began to travel. They traveled in the formation that was instructed in the book of the Parashat B'Midbar, in terms of 3 tribes on each directional, and the Mishkan Shevet Levi in the middle, and according to the flag banner system also prescribed to Am Yisrael. Okay, this is an actual historical event that occurred. And then segment 6 is then a very interesting and enigmatic conversation between Moshe Rabbeinu and his father-in-law. Moshe asking sincerely for his father-in-law to stay with them and not to go back to his country. His father-in-law resisting, pushing back, and Moshe Rabbeinu, let's say, putting forth a more urgent plea for him to stay. And finally, segment 7 is a 2-pasuk parasha paragraph, where it says that when the Aaron would travel, Moshe would say, Hashem, lead us and scatter our enemies. And then when we would rest, we would say, Hashem, come back and dwell amongst the thousands of Israel. It's surrounded by 2 upside down nuns, nun hafuchot. Achamim tell us that these parasha, the 2 pesukim, are out of order. They shouldn't be there. Well, they shouldn't be there. Why are they? Why are they there? And where should it be? It says Rabbi Soloveitchik, this is confusing. It's incomprehensible. The narrative of the Torah seems to have lost what's called the ahdut, the uniformity, the consistency, the flowing sequence of Torah. What are these 8 segments doing? How are they connected to each other? How are they connected to the history of last week's Parashat Naso and what's about to come up in this week's Parashat B'Midbar? That's the question. And to answer the question, Rabbi Soloveitchik puts some context over here. And because right now we're perplexed as to being able to understand where the Torah is going with all of this. So we need context. We need to put this together, glue it together by putting a bigger picture together. And the bigger picture is that back in the burning bush, Kadosh Baruch Hu had already revealed to Moshe Rabbeinu, and in a form of a direct prediction and a directive, what would be the objectives of Am Yisrael after Yetziat Mitzrayim, after the exodus from Egypt. And he told them in a short pasuk, "V'hosiacha ta'am Mitzrayim," when you take it out of Egypt, "Ta'abdu Elohim ala har hazeh." They'll worship God on this mountain. And within that, we can learn, with the help of Hazal and the commentators, that there were 2 objectives post Yetziat Mitzrayim. of Am Yisrael in this desert. Objective number one, of course, is the great gift, Matan Torah, to give us meaning and direction as a nation and be the light of the world, the light to the nations. And secondly, to construct the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the place to worship God. And that were going to be the only two reasons that you'd have to wait at all in the desert. And the truth is, 50 days in, the first one took place, which was Matan Torah. Shortly afterwards, right after Moshe Rabbeinu came back down from Har Sinai, on the 17th day of Tammuz, which is 40 days after he went up, that was supposed to be it. In other words, at that point in time, he was supposed to come down, no other delay, and built the Mishkan. Built the Mishkan, of course, because of the hysteria of the Egel, because of the Erev Rav, because of all the influences, Heta Egel occurred. And because Heta Egel occurred, right there and then, an 80-day delay, Moshe Rabbeinu had to go up and down and pray. And so that really impeded our path. But however, afterwards, he came down, it was Yom Kippur, and at that point in time, everything should have been ready. He came down with the second Luchot, a message of forgiveness. And then, after some months had passed, the construction of the Mishkan had commenced. And there we are, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the 8 days of inauguration. The Mishkan is complete. The two objectives have been achieved. Here we are, Matan Torah and the Mishkan. And it seems like, as he says, the Geula, the impending redemption, has found its realization. We're absolutely ready. Ta'abduna ta'aruhim al-har hazeh, said Hashem to Moshe. The prediction was there. And there was no longer a reason to delay their stay, to prolong their stay in the desert. And here we are, we're ready to go. So now let's see, what has to happen now? Well, of course, the Mishkan has to function. Last week's Parashat, we had in Nassau, the leaders of the tribe, they gave their inaugural gifts. Levi was set aside. Now Levi, in the final step, preparation, has to be appointed and promoted and sanctified. And now once that happens, we were already towards the middle of the month of Nisan, and we're ready to embark upon travel. However, stop. Hey, look at the clock. Look at the wild calendar. It's the 13th of Nisan. We got to bring Korban Pesach. Says the Torah in segment number 2, and here's the connection. After segment 1 and the promotion of Levi put us in a position to be ready to begin our journey to our redemption, then because of the calendar, Torah says we had to stop, we had to offer Korban Pesach as a nation, first time since Yetziat Mitzrayim, and then because of circumstances, some of our members were impure. The advent of Pesach Sheni, that delayed us one more month. And at that point in time, everything seemed to be ready. So now, at least segments 1 and 2 make a lot of sense at that point in time. And so here we are. What Rabbi Soloveitchik called emphatically in his class a number of times, the Great March. The Great March was ready to start. The 4 freedoms, Hoseti, Hisalti, Ga'alti, Lakachti, which allude to redemption from Egypt, the exodus from Egypt and the redemption from there. Afterwards, subsequent Matan Torah, building of the Mishkan, was already accomplished. And the 5th freedom, as we call it, the Hebeti Otam, it allowed us to bring them to the land, was about to become a reality. And the Amud Anan, therefore, was about to do its thing, was about to be our guide. And therefore, the Torah has to tell us the people were about to travel for the first time, embark officially on their march, on their journey towards Eretz Yisrael. Okay, the travel system, the Anan, the cloud, thus segment 3. And of course, masses of people like this have to be well coordinated, and therefore we need the communication system. And therefore segment 4, the Hasoserot. Wonderful. And at this point in time, stop right at that moment, and you see what the Torah then paints for us. The Torah now says, after the cloud and communication system was introduced to us, that second the year, second month, 20th day, the cloud rose, the people began to travel. People began to travel, and the first journey, the first leg movement has been embarked upon. And says Rabbi Soloveitchik, if you just try to live this moment, if you just understand where it says, they left Had Hashem, Derech Sheloshet Yamim, Aron Berit Adonai, Nosea Lifnehem, the ark is traveling before them, Sheloshet Yamim, 3 days in advance, Latu Lahem Minuha, find rest for them. He said at this point, you have to understand not just the historical picture, but the emotional picture that this story is charged with right now, and that the Torah is painting for us. He calls it a mood of expectancy, a mood of permeates the pages. He says tension is now permeating the pages of Parashat Beha'alotecha. There's mobilization and rigid order in the air. Something official going on right now. We were about to head towards our destination. All conditions were met. The promise to Abraham Avinu was about to be realized. The fifth statement or terminology of redemption, the fifth cup, the fifth freedom was about to be embarked upon. And the people are now on their triumphant march. And thus segment number 5. They begin marching towards Eretz Yisrael. In this mood, Moshe Rabbeinu is very excited. Moshe Rabbeinu thus approaches his father-in-law and extends his hand. Now, before this conversation, more context. Rabbi Soloveitchik enlightens us to the fact, we have to think about this. What was the objective of Yetziat Mitzrayim and the Torah, and then going to Eretz Yisrael, for the chosen nation to be redeemed and to be the light to the world, and that what we know as the times of redemption, messianic era, the times of Mashiach. We think of the fact that there's a long haul, there's some distant date that we have to pray for and yearn for and wait for. That was just a matter of circumstances because of our behavior and the ensuing exiles. That wasn't the original plan. The original plan was right here and right now. The entering to Eretz Yisrael was supposed to ensue the times of Mashiach. And Melech HaMashiach was our rabbi and our leader, Moshe Rabbeinu. That was the original intention. That is exactly what we are about to embark upon. And the Torah has already told us in the beginning of the book of Devarim, it was an 11 and perhaps even a 3-day trip to get there. We were on the cusp of Eretz Yisrael, of full redemption and the messianic times. And in that context, Moshe Rabbeinu approaches his father-in-law. And Rabbi Soloveitchik points out that this was not just an invitation of, Dad, please join us on our journey. This was a period of time when Moshe Rabbeinu said, there's no more waiting. There's no Ani Ma'amin B'Murah Shilema V'Yat HaMashiach. Come one day, it's here, Dad. The extended hand of the father-in-law, Yitro, to join on their mission, says the Rav, in a symbolic way, was an invitation to call Umot HaOlam, all of the Gentile nations, to join on this triumphant messianic march to Eretz Yisrael. And he therefore extended his hand to all of the nations. You want to convert, you don't have to convert. You can come as the peripheral nations joining us on this march. Every human being was offered that opportunity. And that was the representation of the invitation from Moshe to his father-in-law, Yitro. Come with us. And he began then, after his first hesitancy, almost to go into pleading and begging mode. You must be there for us because we want you on this trip. We need you on this journey. We want the righteous of the nations, especially, to exist in the times of Mashiach. That is what this represented. And now, first of all, we see a beautiful connection and flow and attachment and sequence of these 6 segments. But of course, tragically, it didn't happen. The tragedy that we don't look at as a tragedy so much because we look to next week's Parashat Shelach and the sin of the spies, Heter Meragelim, is what impeded our path. But it's really the very petty and superficial complaining of the desirers in Kivrot HaTa'ava. The Asafsuf started it all in this week's Parashat, in a couple of Pesukim from now, which really interrupted that triumphant march. Once it was interrupted, it never really tragically got back on track again. And because of that, those next 2 Pesukim, which followed the invitation of Moshe to Yitro, originally, explains the Rav, were in their perfect place. When the Aaron got up and had Moshe pray to God, scatter your enemies. Which enemies? That we have has been enemies since Amalek. When will there be enemies again? 38 years from now, when they eventually reach Eretz Yisrael, the 7 nations. No, it's supposed to be now. It's supposed to be in a few days. A few days from now, scatter our enemies. It wasn't its perfect spot. But because of the tragedy, flipped those Nunim upside down. It became the antithetical parashat to redemption. It was the tragic inverse Nuns that put this out of its place because it no longer belonged here. We no longer were able to continue that journey, the triumphant march to Mashiach. That is the drama of Parashat Beha'alotecha. That is the potential that was embedded in Parashat Beha'alotecha. But instead of leaving on a disappointing note of despair, what we do instead is we take as a model, as a paradigm, this Parashat, that invitation of Moshe to Yitro as a support to everything the prophets have been saying since and everything that we are anticipating. That indeed, as the prophet Yeshaya says in that famous 2nd chapter, that in the future, that Naharu elav kol hagoyim, as a river, they'll flow to us, to Israel. Halechu amim rabim, many nations, they'll say, Lechu v'na'alel har Hashem, let's go and join this nation in the mountain of God. And as echoed by other prophets as well. That really will be what the Messianic times will look like. And therefore, we take that drama and we try to inculcate it in our lives and feel the excitement of the march that tragically never happened yet, but we look at as part of our continual march, Parashat Hashem, our triumphant march, our final march, to our land as Israel, and our final times of Mashiach. Amen. Baruch Adonai L'olam. Amen. Amen.